Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and I think there isn't one of us who hasn't heard about Coach Wooden, one of the great basketball coaches of all time. And Pat Williams, who is an interesting gentleman in his own right, in business consulting and in the sports world, wrote a book about Coach Wooden's greatest secret. And our own Steve Johnson had a chance to talk to Pat Williams about that, so let's join their conversation today.
Well, I appreciate you carving out some time to talk to us, because looking at your schedule, you're a very busy person, if not even just writing books, because this is the second book that you've really written about Coach John Wooden, isn't it?
Well, Steve, actually, it's the third. I wrote a book some years ago called How to Be Like Coach, and that got me into the topic of John Wooden. And then a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Coach Wooden, the 7 principles that shaped his life and will change yours. And this is the third one, called Coach Wooden's Greatest Secret. And we had a wonderful time putting this book together. It has just been released, and I think it just gives us another look at the mind and the life of this remarkable athletic leader, but more importantly than that, a remarkable American who has so much to share with us, even though he passed away a few years ago.
Well, you know, I came from Arizona, so we always had this Pac-10 competition with Arizona State and University of Arizona against any of the California teams. So we saw Coach Wooden for years take what was, every 4 or 5 years, you have the complete team turn over, and yet he was consistent in being able to bring the players to do what they did the best, really. So I want to talk about the greatest secret, which almost sounds like Da Vinci Code Part 3 or something like that. But I want to ask you about the aspects, since it's subtitled The Power of a Lot of Little Things Done Well. That seems to be the key, does it not, to the secret that you found with Coach Wooden? Why don't you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, we were having dinner one night at his favorite restaurant, the Valley Inn, near his home in Encino, California. At this point, Coach Wooden probably was in his early 90s, but still sharp as a tack. And I remember sitting next to him as he was eating his clam chowder. And, excuse me, and I said to him, "Coach, you've been on this earth a long time." I said, "Is there one secret of success, perhaps, that you could point out?" And in that deliberate, understated way, he said to me, "Well," he said, "the closest I could come to one secret of success would be a lot of little things done well." And as I reflected on that, Steve, I thought, boy, as they say in the Southern Baptist world, that'll preach. In my case, I thought, boy, that'll write. That could be a book someday. So it's quite a thrill, frankly, to have that book out and, in bookstores as we speak.
Yeah.
And, and really looking at that one aspect of Coach Wooden's feelings. And then when you really get into the topic, Steve, and really examine how he coached and how he taught and how he went about his life and how he did things, boy, he was on top of every detail.
Well,
left nothing to chance.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that. So once he gave you that idea, did you start thinking yourself, what, I wonder, are those little things that he's talking about, or did he elaborate further on that?
Well, I thought immediately, and he always would tell you that story about the shoes and the socks, which he became famous for. On the first hour of practice every fall, he would instruct his players on how to put their socks on properly, and how to lace up their sneakers, and how to get the tongue adjusted, and how to tie the shoes properly, and how to smooth the socks out so that there would be no little wrinkles. And I did ask him about that once, and he said all I needed was one little wrinkle in one sock on one foot, creating a little blister, which by the end of practice on the first day could have been a big blister. And suddenly I got a key player sitting down for a month, because he didn't get the socks and the shoe thing right. Anyway, Coach Wooden taught that every day, and the players would practice putting their socks on and putting their shoes on properly. And he did say, he said, as far as I can tell, He said, we never had a problem with blisters. So that's the classic story. But he was a absolute stickler for fundamentals. He never viewed himself as a coach, always a teacher. He always referred to himself as a teacher. And what do teachers do, Steve? Well, I'll tell you what they do. I think they're on top of the little things. They're not letting anything slip or slide every day. They're staying and reinforcing that things get done the right way and building a foundation. That's what good teachers do. And Coach Wooden, even though he was teaching basketball, he always viewed himself that was his classroom and that he was there teaching the fundamentals of life, the fundamentals of the game. I mean, just absolutely a stickler for details.
Well, and that reminds me, when people have talked about the impact of him, previous players or coaches that have been with him, they talk not about what necessarily a great coach he was, but what he meant from a lifestyle example, really. And I can imagine, I mean, it sounds like when you're a stickler for small things like that, that almost sounds like you're an over-the-board taskmaster. But that really wasn't his style, was it? When he's talking about those little things, he's not talking about the unimportant things, but little important things, right?
Oh, I think so. He was certainly not a Simon Legree. But I'll tell you this, he had the respect of his players and a certain amount of fear. He could be very tough. He could be very demanding, and required these players to toe the line and stay within his foundation. He wouldn't let anything slide with him, and I don't think they really appreciated him until much later, Steve. Much later, after they became parents and they became grandparents. Then they gravitated back to John Wooden. And fortunately for them, he lived within a few months of 100. So they were able to go to his condo and spend time with him when he was in his late 70s, in his 80s, in his 90s. That doesn't happen in every case with players and coaches, but they were very fortunate to have that late in life relationship. And then they began to really appreciate what he was doing with them. And they came to the conclusion, now we get it. This was far beyond basketball, even though he was a great teacher of basketball and we had tremendous teams, but he was really teaching us how to be successful in life.
Yeah. I want our audience to know we're talking to Pat Williams, who's the author of the book, Coach Wooden's Greatest Secret, The Power of a Lot of Little Things Done Well. Now, although, Coach Wooden is on the cover of it holding a basketball, this isn't necessarily just for people who like sports, is it? I mean, you're talking about making little things that we may think are little things, like thankfulness being a habit and so on. Talk a little bit about what you've done with this book in that lifestyle mode that you were discussing that John Wooden had kind of left as a legacy.
Well, Steve, you're correct. This is far beyond a basketball book because John Wooden is far beyond just a basketball instructor or a basketball coach. He's a life coach. So we get into a lot of different things here, about dealing with fundamentals and keeping things simple and controlling those things over which you have control. We get into some discussion about leadership and how that fits into this whole area. So yes, this is a life book, far beyond basketball. You're not going to come away with a lot of X's and O's in this book. Although I must tell you this, John Wooden's practices, they tell me, were absolutely unbelievable. So organized, so detailed, down to the last second. They were not all that long, but there was not one wasted second in those drills in practice. And Coach Wooden had those practices laid out on 3x5 cards, to the last detail. And that's how he ran them. And then he saved the cards. So if we said to him, Coach, what did you do in practice on December 15th, 1953? I mean, he'd go right to that filing cabinet and pull that card out.
Wow.
And he'd be able to show you exactly, down to the last little detail, what they did in practice that day. That's how he did his coaching. That's how he did his teaching. Quite remarkable. He was an amazing man.
From what you're saying here, I can see how people can take this book and perhaps look at it their own lives, saying, okay, what little things do I need to work on to make a larger impression. I'm also thinking of people who might be in management in some way, and they're looking at this saying, you know, my style hasn't been as effective as I want it to be, even though I have the best intentions. What would you say to those people about what they need to be looking at to kind of get started looking at the detail without becoming obsessed with that and keeping the big picture?
Well, Steve, I think as you ask that question, the first thing that hits my mind is leadership. And you could call this book a leadership book. So I would encourage leaders, first of all, as in the case of John Wooden, the importance of having a clear vision of where you're headed and what you're trying to accomplish and what the goal is, what the mission is. And then you've got to be able to communicate that vision effectively. John Wooden was a wonderful communicator. You know, he didn't waste words. He knew exactly what had to be said, when it had to be said. And he said it with directness and force if necessary, but he was not wasting any words. And people skills are awfully important. John Wooden was not a gusher. You know, he was not going to go out of his way to give false praise. But if a player deserved it, he was certainly there to reinforce and let that player know that he had done a good job. People skills are so important in that area, and I would encourage management leaders, you know, to reach out to people, have a good word for them, encourage them, make sure they know that they're appreciated. Remember Henry Ford years ago said, why is it when all I want are a man's hands and I get his whole body? Well, that's what happens. We get people's whole bodies, and we have to be interested in them.
And it sounds like that John Wooden's legacy, really, you've been able to incorporate within your own leadership as well.
I've learned so much from him, and I'm so grateful that I got to spend time with him, you know, in his last decade. One of the few people, Steve, I've ever been around that when you left him, left his presence, you wanted to be a better person. You wanted to please him. Even though I lived 3,000 miles away, I wanted him to be proud of me. He was in his 90s. I guess I was in my 60s. And, you know, I wanted him to be proud of me and feel good about me as a human being. But as I said, when you left him, boy, it took about 3 or 4 days to come down from the high that you felt when you were with him. I don't know. Maybe there are a handful of people who have made me feel that way, but not many. Not many. He's one of the very few who just had that ability through his wisdom and through his life and through his manner that it just gave you an enormous lift.
Well, that's great. Pat Williams, Vice President of the NBA's Orlando Magic, author of the book Coach Wooden's Greatest Secret. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it very much.
Steve, thanks for the invitation, and I hope people enjoy the book. It's in bookstores now and up on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com as well. Thanks for inviting me. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
All right, well, what an inspiring discussion. All right, coming up next, as you know, we are in the middle of, maybe towards the end of a special session, legislative session in Oregon. And we're going to Skype in Dave Daughter and find out what's going on up there in just a few moments.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Well, welcome back. As you know, our own legislature has been in special session now for a couple of weeks, and this is the new session, what they call the special session on even years. Dave Daughter, who's also a candidate for the state Senate, and has been uniquely selected by the both the Republican House and the Republican Senate as the budget liaison between those two chambers to make sure that we're tracking the budget. We're Skyping him in today from the Capitol to find out what's going on up there. Dave, good to see you, friend.
Good to see you. Great to be with you.
Are you still taking in oxygen?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've been on oxygen for about a week here, but you know, we're winding our way down here. We really are.
All right. Well, good. I guess it's good. What are some of the bills that are seemingly getting some attention up there?
Well, I think the one that is getting the most attention at this particular moment is the one about the marijuana dispensaries and the ability of local jurisdictions to opt out of allowing or opt out of the marijuana dispensaries. What's really interesting, Perry, about this whole issue is that this bill was initially put into the Senate on the Senate side, and it was bipartisan. It was chief sponsors was a Republican and a Democrat, and they put this bill together. And what it basically said was, hey, a local jurisdiction can make the decision that they do not want marijuana dispensaries within the jurisdiction, and so that was put in there. And so then it goes off to the Senate, and the Democratic chair of that committee pulls that part out, and puts in something that says, hey, you know, you can reasonably regulate them through your land use code, but you can't outright deny that. And the other thing that people wanted to put in there, which again was denied, was, you know, a children's protection. I don't know if your listeners know they know what a Pop-Tart is, but do they know what a Pot-Tart is? There's something out there called a Pot-Tart. Wow. And what this basically said was, you know, you can't market marijuana in such a way that it could be construed that you're marketing it to children. You know, just like you can't do that with cigarettes. Right. And that didn't go through. Wow. So what came out was this quote compromise bill that was kind of watered down and everything. And the interesting part of this then, Barry, is it goes over to the House side. Of course, it's got to get through both chambers. Right. It goes over to the House Judiciary Committee, where, of course, the Democrats have a majority, but that committee put back in both of these provisions and passed it out unanimously, bipartisan. Wow. Now it's hung up that maybe it's going to be sent back to a committee, one of the obscure committees where bills go to die. Okay, there's a whole bunch. It's a very, very bipartisan position here that says, look, this is about local control. You know, if you want to have marijuana dispensaries, that's your decision. But if you don't want to have them, if you're Medford and you don't want to have them, then you ought to have the ability to say no. And this gives you that ability. Any idea, Dave, where President Courtney may be on this issue? You know, I don't know where he specifically is on the issue. It's an interesting question. I haven't heard anything about that, and I wouldn't want to speculate. Okay, because he would have the power to bring it back, wouldn't he? Well, actually, it's over on the House side now, so the battle is over on the House side, not on the Senate side. Okay. So we'll see how that all plays out. But again, this is, you know, one of the issues, of course, for a city like Medford is they've already been threatened with lawsuits. Right. Well, what this would do would give them legal cover, top cover, that said, you know what, the state says we can do this, and we've chosen to do that. If another city somewhere in Oregon decides they don't want to do it, fine, that's their decision. So it's kind of interesting, but I got to tell you something. It's made some Democrats, as I understand, mad as wet hens, because they firmly believe that this ought to be a local issue. And so again, it's bipartisan. It's non-ideological, but it's just the right thing to do. So we'll see how that one plays out. I am still amazed that as messy and messed up as Covered Oregon is, that it doesn't seem to be a front and center issue during this special session. Yeah, that's interesting. Now, I just listened to your last your last segment in which they were talking about the leadership of John Wooden and people actually having a vision and a goal and a mission. And I thought that was well done. So, you know, being a legislator is not about the day-to-day management kinds of things. It's about having the leadership to say, you know what, it's time to hold people accountable for what's going on in this state and Cover Oregon is the classic example of that. You're absolutely right, Barry. There's nothing being done. I mean, have you? I don't know if you've seen the latest, but you know, some of the media outlets here got hold of an email from Carol Lawson, who was the IT person on this one, and here's what she said. You know, she protested back to her bosses after she left, and I quote from it. It says, "I have done everything I've been asked to do," Lawson wrote. "I stuck to the talking points even though I protested that they were not accurate."
Holy
cow. She's admitting that, wait a minute, we were giving bad information to the legislative body, and we're not doing anything here to hold these people accountable or find out why people didn't know all these things.
That's more incriminating than some of the stuff we see on Capitol Hill.
You read that and isn't that jaw dropping?
Wow.
I stuck to the talking points even though I protested that they were not accurate.
Well, you know, with all due,
we were saying we were lying to the legislature and to the people.
With all due respect, Dave,
Oregon.
With all due respect, where is the fiduciary responsibility of even the Republicans crying out for some kind of accountability on this thing?
Well, you know, it's interesting that I think on the Republican side there are strong demands that the role of the legislature is to oversee these kinds of oversee these programs. And so what did we do wrong, and what did they do wrong? So so they're pushing for that. You know, now when you start to get into the legal issues, we'll kind of have to see how that plays out, because of course, as you can well imagine, the governor's office has come back and said, you know, well, this email is not that mischaracterizes what we were actually doing. Okay, I get it. You know how this one goes.
I'm just amazed at it. I guess we have to wait and see if Dennis Richardson and Congressman Walden are able to get anywhere with their investigation, and that's yet to play out. But I really thought the purpose of this whole mid-course correction special session was for issues like Cover Oregon and other budget issues.
That's correct. This is the kind of issue that you ought to use this special session for, rather than trying to shove through in a short session some bill that you didn't get through in a long session, and that hurts your feelings, so I'm going to keep working on it. I mean, it's just not the right thing. But you think about if they'd from the very beginning in a 35-day session started holding a routine and a planned out set of hearings on Cover Oregon, and you don't have to throw mud.
Yeah.
You know, just find out. You know, let's go back to the Sergeant Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am.
Yeah. You know? All right. Before I run out of time, is it true that the legislature now is thinking about getting involved in naming the initiative process? I mean, would that be preempting the Supreme Court's role?
Yeah. Yes, it would. That's the very much the concern about that was, you know, wait a minute. You know, this is a separation of powers, or not even a separation of powers issue. This is something that the people of Oregon put into their constitution,
right? And
there's a whole bunch of legislators who are saying we're not going to vote for this, no matter what we think about it, because the people spoke, and there's a way to name these initiatives, and we shouldn't get involved in it,
right?
You know, so you know, somebody said this is not about politics. This is about policy and leadership. And, you know, that this is what the people want.
All right. I got to let you go, but how much longer do you think you'll be involved up there?
Well, we have to be done by next weekend, by the 9th. And I'm kind of thinking toward the end of next week.
Okay. All right, pal. Thanks for your due diligence.
Okay. Well, take care.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Looking forward to getting home.
All right. We're glad to see you home. All right. Dave Daughter with us from the special session up there in Salem. All right. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our special topic on the 4 blood moons right after this.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market. But at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776 5368.
All right, we're back, and our guest today is certainly no stranger, our good buddy John Mittendorf with us. John works with Answers in Genesis, and we use him as the Dove researcher, and we've been talking about the subject of the 4 blood moons. And John, I have to tell you, I just got back from the NRB, and as big as the subject is in bookstores, it was no discussion at the NRB. I find that very interesting.
Yeah, it's
mainly because I guess there is a lot of interpretations over this. But I, you know, you and I sat down. We decided to take this on because there are some significant things to pay attention to.
Yes, there is. And by the way, welcome back.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the award.
Thank you. Well,
congratulations on the award.
God's been good to us. Yeah.
Yeah. So our last program, we went through it kind of slow and technical, but I want to keep it very, very simple because it's easy to get diverted with numbers and what ifs and what have yous and all that stuff. So I thought that I would. Here we go. Hey, now we're working. Cool. Okay. So I just wanted to go back and revisit the last program just for a minute and just review some of the stuff because I know we have some people watching this morning that didn't watch last time.
Right.
And so we're up to speed on that, and then take the opportunity to correct something that I said last time. That you and I started talking, and I forgot to show the last
slide.
Yeah, the last slide got me in trouble.
That's all right. Well, hey, we're willing to come back and make it right. Because our whole purpose on this is to take a look at it objectively, because it is such a hot and very popular topic right now.
Right, boy, is it ever. In fact, if you go in the Christian bookstores, even Barnes & Noble, and you say, hey, do you have a copy of the 4 Blood Moons? Nope. We're sold out. They're flying off the shelves. But we have another order. You can come back in another week and we'll have some more. Wow. So, yeah, it's very popular. So let me go back and just go through very quickly just some basic definitions.
Right.
Because it's easy to get confused a little bit. First of all, a total solar eclipse is when the moon blocks out the entire sun, as viewed from the Earth.
Right.
A lunar eclipse, and let me go to my next graphic right here. A lunar eclipse is when
the Earth blocks out
the Earth blocks out the
moon.
The moon, correct. And the shadow of the Earth then falls on the moon. And then, of course, in a lot of cases, the moon turns to red. And that's because the atmosphere takes the rays that are coming from the sun and actually bends them around the Earth, and they wind up in the shadow, which is called the umbra. Mm-hmm. And it winds up in the shadow that falls on the moon. But what's interesting is that the shorter wavelength lights, such as green and violet and some of those colors, are blocked out. Mm. Reds, yellows, and blacks will make it through. Mm. And that's going to come up when we talk about the counterpoint to this. Okay. So I want you to remember that.
All right.
So basically, that's where that comes from. But basically, what's being talked about is that...
Just tap it, I think. Here we go. Okay, keep talking. All right, I'll get it for you.
Yeah, what happens is that, here we go, the blood moon, and this is where the focus of this program comes from, is that the people referring to this, and by the way, the term blood moon is not an astronomical term.
Okay.
It's normally referred to as a hunter's moon. The blood moon appears to be coming from the people that are involved in this blood moon viewpoint or perspective. So, I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just that there's several different terms for that.
Okay.
Also, if you want to go ahead again, a tetrad, and this is a big deal now, a tetrad is when you have 4 consecutive blood moons. Consecutive. And it's usually within a period of 1 year.
Okay.
Okay? Now, a tetrad can be either 4 blood moons, or it can also be 4 blood moons that will also have a total solar eclipse. It can be either way.
Okay.
Either way. Okay?
All
With me on that one. And let's go to the next one. Then we also talked about last time that the 2 major holidays are Passover and Sukkot. And of course, Passover are the 2 major Israeli holidays, and Passover generally occurs in March or April. Now this is on our calendar, okay, and of course that signifies the exodus from Egypt. And then Sukkot, which is generally September, October, our calendar, and that focuses on God's provision, which is kind of neat. Which is kind of neat. Let's go to the next slide.
All right. Keep talking.
Okay.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little slow this morning.
Okay.
So. You have Passover and Sukkot. Another holiday that we're going to be talking about here shortly is going to be called Shemitah, and I'll get to that in just a minute. We also talked briefly about Genesis 1 1:14, and these are two major verses that this perspective relies on. Genesis 1:14 says, "Then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and days for years." And what is being proposed is that this verse says, however you want to interpret this, but this is what's being said, is that this verse says that the heavens are God's heavenly billboard to announce coming events. Coming events. Okay, you with me on that one?
Yeah. Because I think what they're taking is the last part of it, and let them be signs.
Signs for seasons and for days and for years. And so out of that, that's being interpreted as this is God's heavenly billboard to announce to mankind that something important is happening.
Okay.
The other verse that's commonly used is Joel 2:31. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord.
Okay.
And basically what that's saying is, you see, when the moon turns into blood, that's a precursor to the coming of the great and the awesome day of the Lord. And that's, to a large degree, the way that's being interpreted.
Okay, so what is the definition of the day of the Lord?
The day of the Lord is the end times, is the return of the Lord. Or,
okay, so is it the end?
Or it can be the start of the tribulation in that time frame.
All right, so it's got several meanings to it.
It's got several, can have several meanings to it.
That was my reason for asking that.
Yeah, now let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting is that from AD 1 to the present, when I say the present, I'm talking February 2014.
Okay.
Okay. There has been 7 tetrads. 4 of them have no meaning with Israel or anything that has to do with Israel or prophecy. The last 3, to a large degree, do, depending on how you interpret it. Let's go to the first one. In 1493, there was a tetrad that occurred. In 1493 to 1494, and that was during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. That's when 150,000 Jews were kicked out of Spain. Now, if you look at that very closely, and this is going to come up when we go back into the counterpoint of this, you will notice that the Spanish Inquisition happened in 1492. So the tetrad of 1493, 1494 missed it by 1 year.
Okay.
Are you with me on that one?
Yeah, I think that's significant.
Okay, yes.
It's a year past.
It's a year past.
Okay.
So from that viewpoint then, it is not announcing something that's coming. If you want to say that, what you're saying then is this tetrad is announcing something that's already happened or is in the process of happening.
Okay.
So you have to be careful with the terminology.
So it happened in 1490.
1492. It actually started in 1412.
Right.
That's when the movement started, and in 1492 it came to a head and 150,000 Jews were expelled from Spain. So this was a year later. Then we go to the tetrad.
What about Columbus, 1492?
That's a whole other subject.
I thought I'd throw it in. He sailed the ocean blue.
Columbus has got nothing to do with tetrads here.
Okay, all right.
Okay, how are we doing so far?
You're doing great. You got a couple minutes here.
Okay, because this is complicated. Okay, then Israel became a state in 1948. All right?
Okay.
Okay. In 1949 through 1950, another tetrad occurred.
A year later.
A year later.
Okay.
So that was not an announcement of things to come because it already happened.
Okay.
Then we have the Six-Day War, restoration of Jerusalem to the Jews. That was 1967, 1968. That tetrad was fairly close, or it was right on.
Okay.
So basically what's being said is that the tetrads are a major event that is occurring as a precursor to major prophetic events and dealing with Israel.
Okay.
Out of that, we come to 2014 and 2015. And NASA is projecting that a tetrad with a total solar eclipse will happen starting in April of this year through September of next year, 2014, 2015. And basically all the stuff we've talked about in the previous tetrads up into 2014, 2015, what they're saying is all this is leading up to a major event, which can be a major prophetic event, can be the returning of the Lord, can be the start of the tribulation, if you want to interpret it that way. That's a possibility.
Who's saying that?
Pastors Mark Biltz is one.
Okay.
John Hagee is another one, and there's several other ones out there that probably don't have as high a name as they do.
Of these 4 tetrads you have up here, these 2 obviously are scriptural.
Let me stop you just for a second.
Yeah.
These 3 tetrads have already happened. This is the one that is going to happen. So really, this one is out there as far as what's coming.
But these 2 are scriptural. I guess you could equate the Spanish Inquisition to...
You could equate the Spanish Inquisition as something that is happening, persecution to the Jews, but it's not really a prophetic event per se.
Okay. But it is persecution.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to say on a limited scale, really.
Yeah.
Particularly when you compare it to World War II.
Okay.
Now let's go to the next slide.
All right. We'll have to do this. We'll introduce it and then come back.
Yeah. Now this is what I want to correct. Last program, you and I started talking at the end of the program, and I forgot to bring up this slide, and then I started thinking on my own, and I got into trouble just a little bit. So.
His home phone number is.
Yeah. So let me go back and correct, because this is right around the corner. Actually, it's a month and a half away.
Okay.
The tetrad that is projected by NASA to happen in 2014, 2015 is projected to start on April 15th, 14. That's a month and a half. That is on Passover.
It's also when your taxes are due.
Yes. Amazing how that works, right? Okay, then you have Sukkot, which is October 8th, 14th.
Okay.
Then we're supposed to have a total solar eclipse on March 20th of next year, 15. And then we're supposed to have the third part of the tetrad on April 4th, 15. And the fourth tetrad on September 28th, 15.
All right, let me take a break right here. Okay. John Mittendorf's with us. We're talking about the 4 blood moons. And by the way, these notes will be available. We'll take a quick break and we'll come right back.
Hi, I'm Paula and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
All right, we're back with John Mittendorf, and we're talking about the 4 blood moons. This is a huge topic. There's several books out on it. They're just flying off the shelves, and a lot of people are talking about it. It has to do with a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse, all within a 1-year period, stretched out over 2 years, so to speak. Right. And so we're trying to get our head around this, because some people are saying that this is very significant in Bible prophecies.
And I think also, Perry, what also tends to generate a lot more action on this is that this is projected to start in a month and a half, April 15th of 14. So now if this is something that was supposed to happen 5 or 10 years now, yeah, okay, well, I'll wait till then. But when you have something right around the corner that astronomically is predicted to a large degree by NASA, and then you start linking that up with some Bible prophecies as a possibility of happening, and some people are a little bit more aggressive on the possibility. They say, well, this is a precursor to that happening. You can see how it generates a lot of interest to it.
Okay, so coming up April 15th, we're going to have our first lunar eclipse.
Right, which is on the first day of Passover.
First day of Passover.
Correct.
The next one will be this fall.
Sukkot, which is 6 months later, which is going to be October 8th.
And then between these two, this is significant because on March 20th next year, you have a total solar eclipse.
Correct.
That's when the Earth blocks the sun.
Correct. When the moon blocks the sun as viewed from the Earth.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, it's the other way around.
And by the way, that is a major event when that happens.
Yeah, you know, Peggy and I were in Hawaii, I think, when one of those happened, and it's a weird feeling.
It is. It's very.
You know what? You don't hear any birds chirping, dogs barking, nothing. Everybody just
and that is also when science discovered the light spectrum.
Yeah, with a hole in the paper.
Yes.
You know,
so you don't burn your eyes out.
You put a pinhole in your.
Yeah, exactly right.
All right.
Yeah.
So.
So now, you have March 20th, 15. Total solar eclipse.
Let me stop there.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that the shadow of this. If this was to be built into some kind of a prophetic thing, you would think that this would have a significant impact on the whole globe, but it doesn't.
It does not. That's exactly right. So let's talk about the counterpoint to some of this just for a minute. But before I do that, I want to say that before I start talking about the other side of the coin that looks at this and they say, well, no, we have some major considerations with this, is everything that's being said about this as far as maybe a precursor of the end times, a precursor to the return of the Lord, maybe a precursor to the Ezekiel war that's in Ezekiel 38, not Ezekiel war, but the Gog-Magog war in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Is it possible that that could happen? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Yes.
Absolutely
All
yes.
of those are possibilities.
All of those are possibilities. But when you take the 4 blood moons concept, viewpoint, perspective on its own, there are some significant considerations, I think, to look at before you put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. This one right here, when you look at the elliptical arc of the moon over the Earth, it will travel in March 20th, 15. It will travel over the North Atlantic and the Arctic Oceans, will be a short duration, and it'll be in combination with weather that is normally overcast much of the time. That area of the Earth, when this total solar eclipse happens, will only be viewed if the weather is cleared by 53,000 people approximately. For a major event, you would think that something like this would be visible to a lot more portions of the Earth if the heavens are God's high-definition billboard. So very few people, if any, will see this total solar eclipse.
So then you have to fall back on all 4 of them in sequence.
Then you have to fall back on all 4 of these in sequence, and what's interesting is the first one in April, the second one of this year, the second one in October of this year, the third one of April of next year, and only a portion of the last one, September 28th next year, will be able to be viewed in Jerusalem. In other words, the people in Jerusalem will see very little, if any, of this tetrad.
Okay, so why the emphasis on this?
Well, let me talk, before I answer that question, Perry, and keep that thought in your mind. Don't lose it.
It's hard for me. I already lost it. Already forgot it.
Let's talk about, before we forget, let's talk about the notes.
I want to say to our viewers and listeners, John has done an outstanding job on these notes, and they are in full color. So everything we've been showing on this PowerPoint in color, he has printed in color. We have them here at the Dove, and where else can they get them?
They can get them from my email if they want to email me, and my email is hispeoplerejoice, that's all one word, HISPEOPLEREJOICE, at gmail.com.
All right, hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com, or come by the Dove, and we have them here.
Exactly right.
All right. They're beautifully done. This is good homework here.
Just a couple of things on this I think to consider. First of all, the Bible does, and these are in no particular order, the Bible does not say to watch for tetrads or attach any prophetic significance to tetrads. Okay. It's not mentioned. Okay. This is coming from outside. Okay. Secondly, remember when I talked about how the rays from the sun hit the earth and they're bent around the atmosphere of the earth, then you have the shadow, the umbra, which then falls on the moon. Because the colors are blocked out, a majority of them, there's only, if you want to go back one more, right there. Because a majority of the colors are blocked out, the colors that do make it through are the longer wavelength colors, which can be red, yellow, orange, and black. Okay. Therefore, it's a bit presumptuous to assume that the tetrad that's coming starting in April of this year is going to have a red blood moon, because it can be peach, it can be yellow, it can be orange, it can be black. And the colors are totally dependent on atmospheric conditions, which are humidity,
global warming. You know that's going to be thrown in there.
That's another program. Yeah, atmospheric conditions, humidity, and dust concentrations have a major impact on the colors. So nobody really knows what the colors of this tetrad are going to be starting in April. Okay. So to assume it's going to be a blood moon is a bit presumptuous.
And the defenders would probably say that's insignificant.
Yeah, but when you're putting, when you're making the blood moon concept a big deal and you're trying to link it to Joel 2:31, it becomes a bigger deal, because in Joel 31 it says the moon will turn to blood.
I understand that. I mean, what does tie this together is that there's 4 of them in a year period.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
And by the way, the notes, I have a lot more items under counterpoint if people want to go through this than what we're going to talk about today.
Okay. Right.
And I think also if they want to go to the internet to Dr. Danny Faulkner, who is a professor emeritus of physics and astronomy, Christian, who currently works for Answers in Genesis, wrote an article on this from an astronomy viewpoint. And he brings up some very, very interesting considerations from an astronomy viewpoint that are not mentioned in the 4 blood moons concept.
Okay.
So that's there if people want to access that. Now, it talks about, in this viewpoint, how also that the tetrads and the 4 blood moons are very, very rare, particularly when they fall on the Jewish holidays, and particularly when you have a total solar eclipse, and also particularly when you have Shemitah, which is the Jewish year, Sabbath, of 7 years. And the 7th year falls during this period, which is the day of rest. So basically you have all these things that are coming together during this time frame. And so people are saying, well, see,
you have to recognize that.
You have to recognize that. That is exactly right.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that Passover and Sukkot always fall on the 15th of the month, which is a full moon. And that's when tetrads happen.
Okay.
Or excuse me, that's when blood moons happen.
Happen.
So, yeah. Okay. So it's not quite as rare as you think it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well.
So
our conclusions are.
Let me go over just one more.
Okay, that one.
As we previously mentioned, Joel 2:31 refers to the moon turning to blood, and it says, "Before the coming of the great and the awesome day of the Lord." Okay. In fact, why don't you go back to that verse? Go back 2 or 3.
Okay.
Right there. This verse speaks of unmistakable heavenly phenomena that will signal the imminent arrival of God's wrath in the day of the Lord. Okay? However, the tetrad of 2014 and 2015 that few people are likely to see falls short of catastrophic heavenly phenomena. That is a biggie. That is a biggie.
All right, and I think what I want us to plug in here, folks, we're not trying to tear down the significance of all of this or discredit those who want to put more into it than maybe we're talking about here today. But I think we're trying to put a balance on the table here as to what's really happening. Because if it's the awesome day of the Lord and it's a judgment, it could be something else.
It could be something else.
I mean, it could be, God forbid, I mean, Iran lobs a nuke over the fence.
Right. Yeah,
You know?
It's just that when something like this comes out and grabs everybody's attention. Star of Bethlehem it was another classic example.
Yeah.
It comes out and it grabs everybody's attention. I think one of the major positives to that, Perry, is that it tends to focus people on the Lord, His imminent return.
Right.
Are you ready? What's your relationship to Jesus Christ? And that is a key factor, I think. And this, I think, this does that very well.
I'm so glad you say that, because that's the bottom line. If anything, this should turn us to our relationship to Christ.
Exactly right.
These things are important, but if they become your message and Christ doesn't become your message, I think you missed it.
Yes. So I think what we're saying, Perry, is yes, there's some very, very interesting parts to this 4 blood moons concept. However, there's also some other considerations as you should consider along with this that are not as positive to this from an astronomy point of view. But the key is could this happen? Yes, it could. It might not happen. And I think a lot of people that are watching this program are aware of this. Starting in April here, just in a month and a half, all the way up to September of next year, you may never see any of this, and nothing may ever happen. If that happens, don't be surprised.
Okay. Yeah, and if it does,
and if it does, be aware. Right.
I think the bottom line is this drawing you closer to Christ? Is it putting a spirit of urgency into your own heart to share Christ with other people? If this doesn't draw you to Jesus, then I would drop it like a hot potato. If it does, great. Then put it in your processing and move through. Right. By the way, if you want a copy of these notes, and they are beautifully done, come by the Dove, pick them up, or you can go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com.
Right.
And he'll send them back to you that way. All right, thanks, John.
You bet. Thank you, Perry.
All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
You bet.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.